I've been gaming for years, and it's the best thing for me. I just love getting immersed into these amazing worlds and stories. Nothing interests me more than a good video game. Damn, I love them. So here's a list of my 10 favorite games after years of gaming. The Walking Dead Telltale. I'll be honest, I never expected a game about zombies to hit me this hard emotionally. Like, sure, I knew The Walking Dead was going to be about survival and tough choices, but what I didn't see coming was just how gut-wrenching and personal those choices would feel. Telltale took this world of the undead, stripped away most of the horror you'd expect, and instead focused on something far more terrifying: what it means to protect someone in a world that's constantly falling apart. Playing as Lee, a man with a murky past, and watching this bond form between him and Clementine, a little girl he basically adopts, man, it just gets you. It's wild how this game forces you to grow attached to characters you know you can't keep safe. Every choice you make has weight, and not in that typical butterfly effect way games often promise. You genuinely feel like you're holding lives in your hands. One of the most memorable moments for me, it has to be the train scene. You're faced with this almost impossible decision, and no matter what you pick, it feels wrong. That's the brilliance of The Walking Dead. It's not about winning, it's about surviving, and sometimes survival means making choices that you're going to hate yourself for. But the real kicker, the thing that stuck with me even years after playing, is how the game plays with hope. There are these small glimmers of it, moments where you think maybe this is going to work out, only to have it ripped away in the most painful way possible. And yet you keep going. You push on because you care about these characters. The episodic nature of the game only made the experience better. I remember waiting for the next chapter, mulling over my decisions and dreading what was coming next. It wasn't just about surviving the apocalypse, it was about seeing how far I was willing to go to protect Clem, how much I could take before I broke. So yeah, The Walking Dead by Telltale isn't just a game, it's an experience. It's a story that sticks with you, gnawing at the back of your mind long after the credits roll. The decisions, the relationships, the heartache, it all adds up to a masterpiece that'll forever hold a place on my list of favorites.
Lee, no.
It's okay. It's okay.
The Witcher 3. When I think about The Witcher 3, it's hard not to instantly feel a wave of nostalgia. This game is something special, not just because it's this sprawling fantasy epic, but because of how real it makes everything feel. And I'm not just talking about the visuals or the voice acting, both of which are incredible. It's the world, the characters, and the choices you make that feel like they actually matter in ways I hadn't experienced before. You play as Geralt, a gruff, monster-hunting badass with a heart hidden beneath all that leather and sarcasm. But here's the thing, Geralt's story is more than just kill the monster, get the gold. It's about navigating a world that's just as gray as his hair. Every decision, whether it's a life or death choice or just deciding how to help someone in a small village, carries real weight. And I can't tell you how many times I sat there staring at the screen, trying to figure out what the right call was, only to find out later that right doesn't really exist in this game. For me, the heart of The Witcher 3 lies in its characters. Ciri, Yennefer, Triss, these aren't just NPCs following you around. They're fully realized people with their own motivations, histories, and let's be honest, problems. I got so wrapped up in Geralt's relationships with them, especially his bond with Ciri. It feels like a father-daughter dynamic, and man, some of the moments between them hit hard. You're not just chasing down the wild hunt, you're trying to keep this little makeshift family together in a world that's constantly falling apart. One of my favorite parts of the game is definitely the Bloody Baron questline. It's dark, it's complicated, and it shows you just how deep The Witcher 3 goes when it comes to storytelling. It's not just about good guys and bad guys, it's about broken people in a broken world trying to make sense of things. That questline alone makes you realize how much CD Projekt Red put into crafting a game that wasn't afraid to show the uglier sides of its world. And let's not forget about the open world. This was one of the first games where I found myself just wandering. I'd be en route to a main quest, and then suddenly I'm knee-deep in a random side story, hunting down a spirit or dealing with some ancient curse. The game's world feels alive, full of secrets and stories waiting to be uncovered. Plus, it's freaking beautiful. I can't count how many times I just stopped to take in a sunset or admire the wind blowing through the trees. There's something deeply immersive about how this game looks and feels. Then there's Gwen. Yeah, I know there's a whole world to save, but you best believe I spent way too much time playing that card game. It's just one more example of how The Witcher 3 gives you so many different things to do, and somehow they're all fun. At the end of the day, The Witcher 3 is more than just a game, it's an adventure that sticks with you long after you've finished it. Whether it's the relationships, the choices, or the sheer beauty of its world, this one has definitely earned its spot as one of my all-time favorites. Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't think I've ever been so completely absorbed by a game's world like I was with Red Dead Redemption 2. The way Rockstar brought the Old West to life is honestly insane. It's not just the level of detail in the visuals, but the way the world feels alive and responds to you. I found myself just riding around, not even caring if I was doing a mission or not, because the world itself was that immersive. You're Arthur Morgan, an outlaw, sure, but you're also a man caught in a time that's fading away, and that's where this game truly shines. It's not just about shootouts and robberies, it's about watching the way of life slowly die, and how Arthur and the people around him try to cope with it. From the moment you get dropped into this snowstorm at the beginning, you just know you're in for something special. The game starts slow, real slow, but that's one of its strengths. It doesn't rush you. It wants you to get lost in this world, to learn its rhythm, to see how Arthur fits into everything. I loved how the game isn't afraid to take its time, letting you soak in the little moments. Like, I'll never forget just sitting at camp, listening to Dutch preach about how things will get better, knowing full well they probably won't. It's tragic, it's human, and it's something games rarely touch on with this much depth. Speaking of depth, Arthur is easily one of my favorite protagonists in gaming. He's not your typical outlaw with a heart of gold. He's complicated, he's done terrible things, and the game doesn't shy away from showing you that. But what's so fascinating about him is the way he wrestles with those choices. You see him question everything: his loyalty to Dutch, his place in the world, whether or not he's capable of change. By the end of the game, I felt like I knew Arthur personally, like I was experiencing his journey alongside him. And then there's the world itself. I mean, have you ever seen a game this stunning? From the sweeping plains to the dense forests to the bustling towns, you can tell Rockstar went all out here. The attention to detail is insane. Like, I'm talking about the little things, how your beard grows over time, how your clothes get dirty and need to be cleaned, or how Arthur reacts to the weather. But it's not just about how it looks. It's about how alive everything feels. You can interact with literally anyone and they'll have something to say or do. Maybe you'll get into a bar fight, or maybe someone will ask for help and lead you into a completely new side quest. Every encounter feels like a real part of the world, not just filler. The honor system was another thing that really got to me. Your choices have consequences, and they aren't always obvious right away. You can play Arthur as a ruthless outlaw robbing and killing without a second thought, or you can try to redeem him, helping people and doing the right thing when it counts. Either way, the world reacts to you. People remember what you've done. And man, there are some choices that haunt you, even when you think you're doing the right thing. And then there's the story. Without spoiling anything, I'll just say this: it hits hard. There are moments where you'll be on top of the world, thinking the gang's got a chance, and then everything falls apart. It's heartbreaking. The way the story weaves in themes of loyalty, betrayal, and the inevitability of change is masterful. Dutch, in particular, is such a compelling character. You see him unravel bit by bit, and it's hard not to feel a sense of dread as things spiral out of control. But what really sticks with me even after all this time is the sense of freedom in this game. Whether I was tracking down legendary animals, getting into shootouts, or just chilling on my horse watching the sunset over the mountains, Red Dead Redemption 2 gave me the space to play at my own pace. It's not just a game, it's an experience, a journey through a world that feels like it's slipping away and Arthur's right there with it, trying to figure out his place in it all. Detroit Become Human.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Detroit Become Human is one of those games that just sticks with you long after the credits roll. It's not because of the flashy sci-fi setting or even the jaw-dropping visuals though. Trust me, those are incredible too. No, this game gets to you because it makes you think, like really sit there and wrestle with some pretty deep stuff. Freedom, choice, humanity, it's all there, wrapped up in this beautifully crafted narrative that hits you with some tough questions. At its core, Detroit is about androids who are more human than machine, grappling with their own sense of identity in a world that refuses to see them as equals. The game gives you control over 3 main characters, Kara, Connor, and Marcus, and lets you shape their stories in ways that feel both empowering and terrifying. Each of these characters is on their own path, but they're all connected by this central theme of rebellion and self-discovery. And man, the game makes you feel the weight of every decision. Let's talk about the choices for a second, because they're what really set this game apart. Every decision, even the small ones, feels monumental. I remember one moment early on with Kara where you have to decide how to handle a dangerous situation, and it's not just a cut and dry good or bad choice. There's gray in everything you do. Every outcome feels personal and organic, and the branching storylines are insane. By the time I got to the end of my playthrough, I realized just how many different ways things could have gone, and I immediately wanted to jump back in to see what I could change. For me, Connor was the standout character. His story as a deviant hunting android who starts questioning his role in all of this really hooked me. He's this cold, calculating machine at first, but the way he evolves depending on your choices is super compelling. You feel like you're constantly on the edge with him, never sure if he's going to remain loyal to his creators or break free and find his own way, and his dynamic with Hank, the grizzled detective, is one of the best parts of the game. Their relationship can go in so many different directions, and watching it unfold is like this emotional roller coaster. And then there's Marcus, who steps into the role of a revolutionary leader. His journey is all about leading an uprising, but how you go about it is entirely up to you. Do you push for a peaceful revolution, or do you embrace violence to make a point? The game doesn't shy away from making you feel the consequences of either path. You can see how every choice ripples out, affecting the world, your followers, and even public opinion. It's wild how much control you have over shaping his story. What really blows me away about Detroit is how it doesn't just focus on the big, flashy moments. Sure, there's action and suspense, but it's the quiet, human moments that stand out. A conversation in a rundown apartment, a glance across a crowded street, those little interactions are what make this game feel real. It's not just a story about androids, it's a story about people, about what it means to care, to fight, to hope. And that makes the game hit harder than most big budget titles. By the time you finish, you'll have gone through an emotional ringer, but you'll also feel like you've been part of something important. Detroit Become Human doesn't just entertain, it challenges you. It asks you to think about the world we live in now and what the future could hold. And it does all of this while giving you a level of freedom in storytelling that's pretty rare. That's why it's one of my all-time favorites. It's a game that means something. Yakuza 0. If there's one game that took me by surprise and completely stole my heart, it's Yakuza 0. I went into it thinking it was just going to be another brawler with a bunch of over-the-top fights, but man, was I wrong. This game is so much more. It's got this wild, chaotic energy, where 1 minute you're beating up thugs in the streets of Tokyo and the next you're singing your heart out at karaoke or helping a stranger solve the most random, hilarious problem. It's that mix of intense action and absurd side activities that gives Yakuza 0 its charm, but what really sets it apart is how much heart it has. Let's start with the story, because that's where Yakuza 0 really shines. The game is set in the 1980s, and you get to play as 2 characters, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima. Both of them are caught up in the world of the Yakuza, but their stories couldn't be more different. Kiryu's all about clearing his name after being framed for a murder, while Majima's stuck in a situation that's honestly way more complicated than I expected. What makes this game special is how well it balances these 2 perspectives. You get this deep, dramatic storyline full of betrayal, loyalty, and the struggle for power, but it never feels too heavy, because the game always knows when to throw in some humor or let you blow off steam. Kiryu is the strong, silent type, and he's got this unshakable sense of justice that makes you want to root for him from the get-go. Majima, on the other hand, is a bit of a wild card. He's got this slick, unpredictable vibe, and his story has some of the best character development I've seen in a game. Watching Majima's transformation throughout the story is one of the most satisfying parts of Yakuza 0. You start off seeing him as this cool, collected manager at a cabaret club, but as things unfold, you get to see the raw, emotional side of him that really drives the narrative home. But it's not just the main story that makes Yakuza 0 so great. The side quests are absolutely bonkers in the best way possible. You can go from solving a hilarious dispute about a fake cult to teaching a timid dominatrix how to stand up for herself. And while these these side stories are often ridiculous, they somehow always manage to pull you in with their charm and heart. It's like the game constantly reminds you not to take things too seriously, and honestly, it works. The amount of times I laughed out loud while playing this game is ridiculous. Then there's the combat, which is just chef's kiss. Each character has multiple fighting styles, and switching between them during battles keeps things fresh. Kiryu's got his hard-hitting brawler style, while Majima's breakdancing moves, yeah, you heard that right, are an absolute blast. The fights are brutal, fast-paced, and honestly a bit over the top, but that's what makes them so fun. And just when you think you've mastered the combat, the game throws something new at you, whether it's a crazy boss fight or some random street brawl that escalates way beyond what you expected. But what really blew me away about Yakuza 0 was how much it cares about its world and characters. Kamurocho and Sotenbori, the two cities you explore, feel alive in a way that most open world games don't manage to pull off. You're constantly running into unique characters and weird situations that feel like they could only happen in this game. And despite all the absurdity, there's this underlying sense of loyalty, honor, and camaraderie that makes the story resonate on a deeper level. I have to mention the minigames because honestly, they deserve their own spotlight. Whether it's running a real estate business, managing a cabaret club, dancing, bowling, or just hanging out at the Sega arcade, the game gives you so much to do that you could easily spend hours doing side stuff and still have the time of your life. I think I lost days just trying to become a karaoke king or mastering the art of disco dancing, and the game somehow makes it all feel connected to the world. At its heart, Yakuza 0 is a game about duality. It's intense and serious, but also goofy and lighthearted. It's a crime drama, but it's also a game about helping people with the most random problems. And yet, it all comes together so perfectly. I didn't expect to feel so much for the characters or to get so wrapped up in a story about the Yakuza, but Yakuza 0 does that to you. It pulls you in with its crazy energy, keeps you hooked with its emotional depth, and leaves you wanting more long after you finished it. That's why Yakuza 0 is one of my all-time favorites. It's chaotic, heartfelt, and unforgettable. Tomb Raider 2013. When I first picked up Tomb Raider 2013, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew the series had a huge legacy behind it, but it had been years since I'd played a Tomb Raider game, and I wasn't sure if a reboot would be able to capture that same magic. But wow, I was wrong. This game not only revitalized the series, but also made me fall in love with Lara Croft all over again. And not just because of her iconic dual pistols or her knack for treasure hunting. This was a new Lara, more vulnerable and raw, but somehow even more compelling. The game starts off with a bang. Lara's shipwrecked on a mysterious island, and from there it's a non-stop ride of survival, discovery, and character growth. What hit me right away was how human Lara felt in this game. She's not the confident adventurer we all know just yet. She's young, unsure of herself, and honestly scared. And that's what makes her journey so incredible. You're with her every step of the way as she transforms from this terrified, inexperienced archaeologist into the badass survivor we've come to expect. The combat and exploration are another highlight. The bow quickly became my favorite weapon. It feels so satisfying to use, and it's got that perfect mix of stealth and power. There's something incredibly rewarding about taking down enemies silently or setting traps with the environment. But what I really loved was how the game didn't rely solely on combat. Yeah, you're going to get into some intense firefights, but there's just as much emphasis on exploring the island and solving puzzles. And that's where the Tomb Raider DNA really shines through those moments when you're crawling through ancient ruins, piecing together clues, and discovering hidden secrets. And let's talk about the tombs, because honestly, they're one of the best parts of the game. They're not these massive, sprawling dungeons, but rather cleverly designed puzzles that make you stop and think. It's a nice change of pace from the more action-heavy parts of the game, and it really reminded me of what made the original Tomb Raider games so great. You're not just running and gunning, you're also using your brain to figure out how to progress. But what really stood out to me in this reboot is Lara Croft's character development. She starts off unsure of herself, constantly questioning whether she has what it takes to survive. But as the game goes on, you see her grow into this confident, determined warrior. The game makes you feel her struggle, from the brutal injuries she sustains to the emotional toll of everything happening around her. And by the end, when she finally steps into the role of the Tomb Raider, you feel like you've been on that journey with her. It's not just about physical survival, it's about Lara discovering her inner strength and embracing her destiny. The supporting characters, though not as fleshed out as Lara, still add depth to the story. The dynamic between Lara and her mentor, Roth, is especially poignant, as he's the one who sees her potential from the start, even when she doubts herself. There's also a real sense of camaraderie between the group that keeps you invested in their survival, even if some of them don't get as much screen time as I'd have liked. For me, this reboot wasn't just a return to form for the series, it was a whole new beginning. Lara was no longer just an icon of gaming history, she felt real, relatable, and most importantly human. That's why Tomb Raider 2013 has earned its spot as one of my favorite games. It's not just about raiding tombs or surviving in harsh environments, it's about witnessing the rebirth of a character we all thought we knew, and realizing there's so much more to her than we ever imagined. Uncharted 4.
Hold on! Nathan! They're gaining on us! I know! We'll crank it! Sam, I'm going as fast as I can!
If there's ever been a game that perfectly balances jaw-dropping action with heartfelt storytelling, it's Uncharted 4: Thief's End. I knew going in that this was supposed to be Nathan Drake's final adventure, but I wasn't prepared for just how emotional and satisfying that journey would be. Naughty Dog pulled out all the stops here, delivering not only some of the best set pieces in the series, but also one of the most personal stories in gaming. Nathan Drake has always been the charming rogue we've all grown to love, but in Uncharted 4, we see a different side of him, a more grounded, reflective Nate. He's older now, trying to settle down into a normal life with Elena, and honestly, it was kind of refreshing to see him out of the treasure hunting game. But of course, that doesn't last long. Enter Sam, Nate's lone lost brother, and suddenly we're pulled back into the world of high-stakes treasure hunting, deadly mercenaries, and ancient mysteries. And let me tell you, the chemistry between Nate and Sam is fantastic. Their relationship adds this whole new layer to the story that just wasn't there in the previous games. You can feel the tension, the brotherly bond, and the weight of their shared history. But let's talk about the gameplay, because Uncharted 4 takes everything we loved about the series and dials it up to 11. The climbing and parkour feels smoother than ever, and the combat is tight and responsive. What really stood out to me though was the inclusion of the grappling hook. It adds this whole new dynamic to the platforming, letting you swing across massive gaps or use it creatively in combat. There's just something so satisfying about swinging around, landing a perfect headshot, and then seamlessly transitioning into a fistfight. Speaking of set pieces, this game delivers. From the insane car chase through the streets of Madagascar to the crumbling ruins you barely escape in time, it's classic Uncharted. But what I loved most is that these moments don't feel forced, they fit perfectly within the narrative, pushing you forward while keeping you on the edge of your seat. And yet, as bombastic as the action is, the game never loses sight of the emotional core of the story. One of the biggest highlights for me was the way Uncharted 4 tackles Nathan's struggle with his past. There's this constant push and pull between his desire for a quiet life with Elena and his addiction to the thrill of adventure. It's not just about finding treasure, it's about Nate coming to terms with who he is and what he's willing to sacrifice. Watching that dynamic unfold, especially in his interactions with Elena, adds a depth to the character that I wasn't expecting. Their relationship feels real with all its ups and downs, and I found myself genuinely invested in their future. The visuals are stunning too. I mean, it's Naughty Dog, so you know it's going to look incredible, but Uncharted 4 pushes it to another level. The attention to detail is mind-blowing, whether you're exploring lush jungles, ancient catacombs, or the cliffs of a long-lost pirate colony. And the animations are so fluid that every movement feels natural. I found myself stopping more than once just to take in the breathtaking scenery. This game is a feast for the eyes, plain and simple. But at the end of the day, what really makes Uncharted 4 stand out is how it wraps up Nathan Drake's story. The final few hours of the game hit hard, bringing everything full circle in a way that's both emotional and satisfying. I won't spoil anything, but let's just say the ending gives Nate the closure he deserves. It's not just about the treasure or the adventure, it's about family, redemption, and finding peace. And in a series known for its action-packed thrills, that's what makes Uncharted 4 truly special. For me, this game isn't just a fitting end to one of gaming's most iconic characters, it's a reminder of why I fell in love with this series in the first place. It's about the adventure, sure, but it's also about the heart. That's why Uncharted 4 remains one of my all-time favorite games. Plague Tale Requiem.
It's too fast! We'll make it! Oh no! The tower!
Plague Tale Requiem is one of those games that sneaks up on you and leaves you absolutely floored by the end. I knew it was going to be an emotional roller coaster, but I wasn't prepared for just how dark, intense, and at times heartbreakingly beautiful this game would be. This is a sequel that takes everything great about a Plague Tale innocence and cranks it up, diving deeper into the story of Amisha and Hugo, while also pushing the limits of what you can expect from a narrative-driven game. The story picks up not long after Innocence, and you can feel right away that things are darker, heavier. Amisha and Hugo are trying to survive in a world that is still very much out to get them. But what makes Requiem special is how it doesn't shy away from showing the toll that survival has taken on them, especially on Amisha. She's been through hell, and you can see it in how she interacts with the world and the people around her. This is a game about fighting, yes, but it's also about trauma and how much one person can endure before they break. Misha's relationship with Hugo is still at the heart of the game, and it's as gut-wrenching as ever. Watching her struggle to protect her little brother while also trying to keep herself together is both inspiring and heartbreaking. Hugo's abilities are growing, and with that comes a whole new level of danger, not just from the outside world, but from within himself. The game really leans into this push and pull between the siblings, and you feel their bond deepening with every challenge they face. But at the same time, there's this constant dread hanging over everything, like at any moment it could all fall apart. And let's talk about the rats, because wow, they've somehow managed to make them even more terrifying. The swarms are bigger, more aggressive, and they play an even larger role in the gameplay this time around. You're constantly trying to outsmart them, using light and other creative tools to manipulate their movements, but there's always this tension that they're right on the edge of overwhelming you. It's not just about the horror of the rats themselves, it's the way the game uses them as this ever-present reminder of death and decay. Everywhere you go, you're reminded that the world is falling apart, and it feels like you're always one step away from being consumed by it. But what really stands out to me about Requiem is how it evolves the gameplay. It's not just about sneaking past enemies or avoiding rat swarms anymore. Amisha's learned how to fight. She's more capable now, and the game gives you more tools to deal with threats. Whether you're using a crossbow, crafting alchemical solutions, or taking down enemies with stealth, there's this satisfying sense of growth in Amisha's abilities, and yet, even with all this new power, the game never lets you feel too safe. There's always that underlying vulnerability, like you're never fully in control, which keeps the tension high throughout. By the end of Requiem, I was emotionally drained, but in the best way possible. It's a story that lingers, one that doesn't let you forget the weight of the journey you've just been on. Amisha and Hugo's story is one of survival, yes, but it's also about love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between siblings. It's a dark and harrowing journey, but one that I'll never forget. For me, A Plague Tale Requiem is a masterpiece of storytelling, and it's easily one of my favorite games of all time. Mafia Definitive Edition.
Christ, I don't know how everything got so balled up.
No one ever sees the hairpin until it's too late. But you didn't get handed a heater in the nursery, did you?
No. I was a cab driver back in 30.
There's something about Mafia Definitive Edition that feels like stepping into a time machine. You're dropped into the gritty, glamorous world of 1930s America, complete with jazz, old school cars, and the rise of organized crime. This remake isn't just a visual upgrade, it's a full-on rebirth of a classic that respects the original while refining the gameplay and story in all the right ways. And honestly, if you're a fan of crime dramas, you owe it to yourself to play this game. It's The Godfather meets Goodfellas, but with that interactive element that makes it so much more immersive. At the heart of it all is Tommy Angelo, a taxi driver who gets caught up in the criminal underworld after a chance encounter with two mobsters. What I love about Tommy is that he's not your typical born criminal type. He's an everyman who gets in over his head and slowly finds himself drawn deeper and deeper into the world of the Salieri crime family. Watching his rise through the ranks is incredibly satisfying, but what really grabbed me is the moral conflict Tommy wrestles with. This isn't just about climbing the criminal ladder, it's about survival, loyalty, and the consequences of the choices you make. The story is easily one of the strongest parts of the game. It's a classic mob tale filled with betrayal, loyalty, and all the intrigue you'd expect from a 1930s crime drama. But what makes it special is how grounded it feels. Tommy's not a heartless killer, he's a guy trying to make a living in a world that's increasingly forcing him to cross lines he never thought he would. You see how the pressure of the mob life starts to weigh on him, and the game does a fantastic job of making you feel the weight of those decisions. And then there's Lost Heaven, the city that feels like a character in its own right. The developers did an incredible job recreating this fictional 1930s American city. It feels alive, from the vintage cars and fashion to the period-specific radio shows playing in the background. The attention to detail is insane, and it really makes you feel like you've stepped into a different era. There's something so satisfying about cruising through the streets in those old-school cars, watching the city change as day turns to night, all while jazz blares through the speakers. The missions themselves are varied and exciting, blending intense shootouts, high-speed car chases, and quieter moments of tension as you carry out jobs for the Salieri family. Each mission feels meaningful, and the pacing is just right. You're never doing the same thing for too long, and the stakes constantly feel like they're getting higher. I have to mention the race mission because it's one of those infamous moments from the original game that was absolutely brutal. In the remake, they've made it a little more forgiving, but it's still a white-knuckle experience that had me sweating bullets. But what really sets Mafia Definitive Edition apart from other open-world games is its focus on storytelling. While there is a free roam mode, the game is primarily narrative-driven and it works. It's less about mindlessly collecting things or checking off side activities and more about experiencing a tight cinematic story. It knows exactly what it wants to be and it excels at it. I also have to mention the visuals because this game looks stunning. The remake takes full advantage of modern technology and it shows. The lighting, the textures, the character models, it all looks incredible. From the rain-slick streets to the neon signs lighting up the night, the atmosphere is immersive, making you feel like you're right there in the thick of it. The level of detail in the environments, the cars, and even the way the characters move is top-notch, and it makes the world of Mafia Definitive Edition feel that much more real. At the end of the day, Mafia Definitive Edition isn't just a game, it's an experience. It's a love letter to the golden age of crime stories, wrapped up in a beautifully crafted package. The mix of engaging story, tight gameplay, and a world that feels alive makes this one of my favorite games. It's not just about being a mobster, it's about navigating the complicated relationships, the betrayals, and the personal struggles that come with it. And when the credits rolled, I was left with that bittersweet feeling of having gone through an unforgettable journey. If you haven't played it yet, do yourself a favor and dive into the world of Mafia Definitive Edition. You won't regret it. Sleeping Dogs.
Come on, we can work something out, right? 唔使諗啦，入到監倉裏面慢慢反省啦。而家唔係事必要你講，除非你自己想講。
When I think of Sleeping Dogs, the first word that comes to mind is underrated. This game might not have gotten the same level of hype as some other open world titles, but it's one of those gems that sticks with you long after you finish playing. Set in the bustling, neon-soaked streets of Hong Kong, Sleeping Dogs feels like a blend of a classic cop drama and a martial arts movie, all wrapped up in a story that's both gritty and personal. If you're looking for a game that's got the heart of GTA but with a focus on hand-to-hand-to-hand combat and a unique setting, this is it. You play as Wei Shen, an undercover cop tasked with infiltrating one of Hong Kong's most dangerous triads. Right off the bat, what hooked me was Wei's dual identity. He's not just a cop playing a role, he's torn between loyalty to the police force and the bonds he forms with the triad members. The story constantly keeps you on edge as Wei walks that razor-thin line between duty and brotherhood, and it's hard not to get emotionally invested in his struggle. You see him torn between his mission and the friendships he forms with people he's technically supposed to be taking down. And that's what makes Sleeping Dogs stand out. It's more than just a crime story, it's a story about loyalty, betrayal, and identity. Now, let's talk about combat, because this is where Sleeping Dogs absolutely shines. Most open world games rely on gunplay, but here, it's all about hand-to-hand combat, and it's satisfying. The martial arts inspired fighting system is fluid and brutal, with a focus on countering attacks and using the environment to your advantage. 1 minute you're dodging punches, and the next you're smashing a thug's face into a fish tank or slamming them through a window. Every fight feels dynamic and cinematic, like you're in the middle of a Hong Kong action movie, and when the game does throw in some gunplay, it feels just as polished, with slow motion diving mechanics that make you feel like an action hero. The open world of Hong Kong is another highlight. It's not the biggest map out there, but it's densely packed with life. The streets are alive with the hustle and bustle of markets, food stalls, and pedestrians going about their day. There's this constant energy, especially at night when the neon lights reflect off the rain-soaked streets. The city feels vibrant and alive, and the mix of urban environments from the luxury high-rises to the gritty back alleys gives you plenty to explore. And it's not just a backdrop, the world is interactive. You can participate in street races, bust illegal fight clubs, gamble, and even sing karaoke, which honestly is way more fun than it should be. And speaking of missions, the storyline is full of twists and turns. As Wei gets deeper into the criminal underworld, the stakes keep rising. It's not just about taking down the bad guys, it's about survival, loyalty, and the price of living a double life. You start to question who the real villains are, and that gray area between right and wrong is something the game plays with constantly. The characters you meet, like Jackie, Massachusetts, and Winston, all feel like real people with their own motivations and struggles, and that makes the story hit harder when things inevitably go south. Sleeping Dogs might not have had the marketing push of other open world games, but it's got heart, depth, and a style all its own. It takes familiar elements like undercover cop dramas and open world exploration and infuses them with a unique setting and a focus on martial arts combat that makes it stand out. It's a game that knows what it's about, and it delivers on that vision with confidence. Even after all these years, Sleeping Dogs still holds up as one of the most entertaining and engaging open world experiences out there. The story, the combat, the setting, it all comes together in a way that makes it one of my favorite games of all time. If you've never played it, you're seriously missing out on one of the most underrated gems in gaming.